Hey everybody, how are you? I hope all is well, and I hope everybody is thriving and being productive and all the things that God wants them to do. I decided to make this video because lately God has been ministering to my heart about going back to the basics. And initially I kept hearing it and I'm like, okay, God, I hear you, back to the basics. And God was reminding me, like, it's back to the drawing board, back to the heart of things, back to where the hunger was, back to the things that drew the hunger. And I'm like, God, I get it. And I knew this was something that God was ministering to my heart because it was so many other people that I've been noticing lately that have been saying the same thing, and who have been feeling the same way. And when you think about back to the basics, it's going back to a simpler way of doing things, a simpler way of thinking. And we have gotten into this space where we overthink things and we make things more complicated than what it is. So I know lately God has been talking to me and reminding me of back to the basics. And he's been not just on a spiritual aspect, but God has been reminding me about going back to the basics in my word, in my worship, in how I work, even how I was marketing in the beginning with my business, and trying to bring back all the things that basically grew the passion and allowed me to be in this space where I loved what I was doing. So not only God has been bringing me in that space of bringing me back to the basics in this journey through my walk, but also through my business. He has been showing me the things that I used to do, the things that were important in my business and my beauty career. He's also opening my eyes to things within my culinary business, things that he's been introducing me to, giving me ideas and plans. And he's basically been refreshing my memory, like, you used to do it like this. What's happening? And a lot of us have lost our desire to do certain things the way that God intended it because we made it more difficult than what it was. God gave us the fundamentals. God gave us the instructions. He gave us the manual plan on how to do it. So God is telling us to get back to the basics with our health, with our exercise, with our business, with our jobs, back to the basics in how we connected with people, back to the basics in how we used to pray and how we used to worship. And God wants us to be in that space where we stop making things so difficult. And when I say making things so difficult, we have prioritized other things. And by us putting it in a bigger place and prioritizing it, now what happens is we completely forgot the beginner stuff. So in essence, because we've prioritized things that weren't necessarily part of the fundamentals, the instructions of what God gave us, now it kind of threw us for a loop and put us in another position where we tend to have to overthink certain things, and we're like, God, is this what you want us to do? Knowing God didn't give us the instruction on it. Also as well, things with life, pertaining to friendships, pertaining to certain things. God wants us to revisit how we used to do things in the beginning, because the new way that we've been doing, the new way that we've been thinking is not working. It's not what he designed for us. So, when you think about it, when God tells you back to the basics, it takes you back. Especially with me, it takes you back to a place where you become nostalgic. You're like, oh, I remember I did it like this, and I remember that it was so much peace in doing it this way. I remember that, doing it the way that God intended me to do it didn't bring any harm, and it wasn't so much of a headache. And, what I learned is sometimes the simplest things are impactful and powerful and meaningful. And sometimes we do so much that we forget the true thing that God is trying to do. So in this quest and in this journey of getting back to the basics, it's like you're relearning yourself, relearning all the necessities and the blueprints and all the stuff that God had taught you in the beginning to stay afloat. Because what we don't realize, sometimes we overthink things so much that the basic plan that God gave us is the plan to survive. And now God is bringing you back to that place where you're retracing and tracking back your steps, retracking who you were, retracking how you used to move, your thought pattern, all these stuff. And God is a good God, because for God to love us so much and all of us to be in sync and in alignment, and everybody has been hearing, hey, this is the season where we need to get back to the basics. Get back to that point where your business wasn't booming. What were you doing to make it boom? What was it that you were doing to keep your body healthy? All these things. And God is utilizing this moment to go back to the simpler things, because when it was so simple, that's when we relied on God the most. When we overthinking makes us think of different ideas and things that we do. And oftentimes when you overthinking kind of puts you in a place where you don't rely on God. You're relying on your flesh. You're relying on your own strength. So when you're back in that basics mindset, being back to the basics allows you to hear the voice of God, so God can bring back to the remembrance of exactly what it is that you need to do in this season to elevate to the place that He has promised you. So, what is it that God is telling you in this season as He's telling you to revisit and retract the things of the past, the things that were simpler, the things that didn't involve too much overthinking? What is it that God wants you to do to utilize the very thing that He gave you as a gift to the world? So ponder on that today. Ask yourself, God, okay, you're taking me back to the basics. And back to the basics is like a training. It's a boot camp. It's like, okay, it's bringing back discipline. It's bringing back structure. It's bringing back knowledge in certain areas where you thought you lacked, but you didn't lack. You just need a refresher. So back to the basics is just basically God is re-instructing you on how to do it right again, because your overthinking has took you to a place where you've been doing it wrong. So I just had to chime in and give, drop some gems on that. But let's get back to the basics, y'all. God's talking.